So we're going to jump right into it. We're going to get going on our first story today, which is about a woman who wants to give back her January 6th pardon. So it says, I've got my Ground News agitator pulled up here, and it says, convicted January 6th rioter known as ex-MAGA Granny says Trump is all lies. This story was brought to me by somebody who's personally close to me. I didn't just pull this story off of the agitator. There are people who know what I do, and sometimes they hand me stories and stuff, and they're like, hey, this is interesting. And it was brought to me yesterday or the day before, and I was like, wow, this is really interesting. And it's specifically interesting because a lot of people don't know, but I was actually not super proud to admit this, ironically, but for a short while in 2018, like a matter of months, I was a Proud Boy. Jeff knows, some of the other people that I do YouTube stuff with know, I wasn't in the movement for very long. I was targeted by an undercover FBI agent who wanted me to be an informant on them, and I was like, nah, those people don't fuck around. I'm not trying to get shot. I'm not trying to do any of that. So I respectfully, I guess, backed away, and I was like, I don't want to be any part of this anymore. But with my having some ties to them and like seeing how that whole movement works, this story kind of like it's a little bit more personal to me, because like this is somebody who is coming out and saying, hey, I was disillusioned by the MAGA movement, which I completely understand how that goes. So we'll look down here. We see that we have 50% coming from the center as far as our bias distribution goes, 17% from the right, 33% from the left. When I pulled this story up yesterday, there were 2 stories about it. There are 8 today. So we get a little bit better bias distribution here, but it was mostly just the left. Like this was a completely right blind spot until it says the bulwark, which leans right with high factuality, picked it up. But that's not who we're going to be reading today. We're going to go down and we're going to read the story from CBS News. And I've already got it pulled up here. So, former Trump supporter Pamela Hemphill refuses and returns her January 6th pardon. So let's just get into it. Let's see where Pamela's coming from here. So, amid the wave of pardons and commutations, President Trump has doled out some of his supporters. President Trump has doled out to some of his supporters and surrogates. One former MAGA loyalist in Idaho is fighting to return her pardon. Pamela Hemphill is one of more than 1,500 people who Mr. Trump pardoned earlier this year for their roles in the U.S. Capitol insurrection. She has invoked help from her Republican senator to formally refuse and block the pardon Mr. Trump issued her on January 20th, his first day back in the White House. Though Hemphill was a defendant in the largest criminal prosecution in American history, she's seemingly standing alone now as the only January 6th defendant to refuse the clemency Mr. Trump offered. Speaking with CBS News from her home in Idaho, Hemphill said, "The pardons just contribute to their narrative, which is all lies, propaganda. We were guilty, period." So, looks like you've got somebody who's trying to take accountability for their actions as opposed to being like, presidential pardon, so I'm good. We all know that they're gaslighting us. They're using January 6th to continue Trump's narrative that the Justice Department was weaponized, she said. They were not. When the FBI came to my home, oh my God, they were very professional. They treated me very good. Hemphill pleaded guilty to a misdemeanor charge for her role in the crowd on January 6th, 2021. Prosecutors argued Hemphill was in the front of the crowd that confronted the U.S. Capitol Police and other law enforcement officers, attempting to keep the rioters behind metal bike rack barriers. They alleged Hemphill galvanized others to descend on Washington for certification of the electoral vote after the 2020 election, according to the court filings. Sorry, I gotta scroll down here. On December 28th, 2020, Hemphill posted encouragement to go to Washington, D.C. for January 6th, saying, it's a war. On January 1st, 2021, she posted a message saying, on my way to Washington, D.C., January 6th, the prosecution said. And then you can see a picture of her holding a fairly large-looking gun. So Hemphill also pleaded guilty in January 2022 to a count of unlawful parading and was sentenced later that year to a term that included 3 years of probation. Her case mirrors many other misdemeanor cases from the U.S. Capitol siege in which members of the crowd were not accused of making physical contact with the police or damaging any property. The prosecutors emphasized how each member of the mob contributed to the breakdown of police lines, the injuries, and the damage to American democracy. Sure. Hemphill told the CBS News the pardons for her fellow members of the crowd were inappropriate and damaging America's views of the federal government. How could you sleep at night taking a pardon when you know you were guilty? You know that everybody there was guilty. I couldn't live with myself. I have to be right with me and with God, Hemphill said. This is someone taking personal accountability, and I think that this is amazing. Former pardon attorney Liz Oyer, who was fired by the Trump administration in March after a disagreement over a case, told CBS News that Hemphill's protest is a sharp contrast from the conduct of other Capitol riot defenders who championed their own pardons. Court filings reviewed by CBS showed other January 6 defendants have utilized their pardon certificates to make arguments in court about their cases, restitution payments, or other legal matters. In contrast, Senate records obtained by CBS News show Hemphill sought assistance from Senator James Reich to secure a formal acknowledgement from the Department of Justice that she will not accept her pardon. That is awesome. On April 2nd, correspondence from the Office of the Pardon Attorney to Senator Reich, the Pardon Attorney's Office wrote, Ms. Hemphill's non-acceptance is noted, the letter said in the Justice Department, would not issue Hemphill a formal certificate to chronicle her pardon. So that doesn't mean that the pardon has been refused. That just means that they're not gonna give her the certificate that other people want that's signed by Trump. Like, that's like getting your YouTube play button, but for the Capitol riot, which is kind of weird. In a statement to CBS News, a spokesperson for Reich said the Office of the U.S. Senator Jim Reich regularly assists constituents with matters pertaining to federal agencies or programs. Due to privacy concerns, we cannot disclose the details about individual cases. Hemphill has sparred on social media and podcasts with other January 6 defendants over her arguments about what she says is the whitewashing of the Capitol riot. In one segment on a podcast earlier this spring, Hemphill debated Enrico Tarrio, a former Proud Boys leader who was convicted at trial and received the longest prison sentence of any January 6th defendant. Tarrio's sentence was commuted by Mr. Trump. Now, I will say, just to interject really quickly here, when I was a Proud Boy, Gavin McInnes was in charge of them. I had never even heard of Enrico Tarrio. So, yeah, I was well out of the movement before Gavin even relinquished control. So Trump will probably say, that ungrateful lady, I'm going to make sure she gets back on probation and give her the worst you can give her. I won't be surprised, she said. I mean, hopefully Trump has no say in the matter. I don't know. I don't know how it all works, but I wanted to highlight Pamela's story. I think that that's really awesome. I respect what she's doing. Hey, Cousin Matt here. Thanks for checking out that clip from Nightly News This Morning, a show I do live on this channel on Tuesdays and Fridays at 6:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. If you like the content, please drop the video a like. Feel free to subscribe if you haven't already. And I really do appreciate your comments. I'm really looking forward to having a discussion. I'd love to know what you think about it, and we will see you in the next one.